Okay, so my name is Natalia. I'm one of the organizers for GDG3City. We are meeting every now and then to talk Android. And if you feel like you would like to join us and help us organize the meetings, and it would be perfect if you are from the area, from the Tri-City in Poland, so Gdańsk, Sopot, then feel free to contact us and join the team, basically. And also in the chat, I gave you the link to our Slack community. So you are also invited to join there. And today we will have 3 really amazing topics about Android. So let me share my screen and show you a little presentation about what we are going to see today. So first we will have Patryk Serek talking about 5 common mistakes in applications based on clean architecture. And Patryk, of course, will tell more about himself. Then we will have Jakub Mosakowski, who will tell us about how to make manual testing easier with Hyperion. So it's also very interesting. And then we will have Mohit Sharma, who will tell us how to keep in sync, so about data in an offline world. So those are the topics for today. And without further ado, I will voice to our first presenter, which is Patryk. So Patryk, the stage is yours. I hope that we will be able to do it without technical issues. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation for this event, Natalia. And yeah, today I'm going to tell you about 5 common mistakes in applications based on clean architecture. But before I move any further, let me briefly introduce myself. So my name is Patryk Serek. I'm a senior software engineer. I'm a technology enthusiast, the same as programming enthusiast. I love to learn, but I also love to share this knowledge with other people. Because of this, I run a weekly newsletter, which is called Android in a Minute. It's a newsletter for Android devs. I also created an online course about architecture in Android apps. And the plan for today is to show you how to avoid common mistakes in clean architecture in order to increase quality of the code. But what's more important, all of the solutions are easy to implement. So after my talk, after this meeting, you can stay in front of your computer, launch Android Studio, and try to implement one of my suggestions. So let's start. Let's start with the first mistake, which is lack of model mapping. As you probably know, clean architecture has 3 layers. There are a data layer, a domain layer in the middle, and a presentation layer. If we want to somehow represent the data in our application, we should do it separately for each layer. So, for example, if we have a user model, we should create separate models for each data, for each architecture layer. Why? Because each layer has a different purpose of having this object. So let's start with domain layer. This is a layer that holds our business logic, of our application. We have a simple user data class here with 2 properties, first name and the last name. And as you can see, this class is written in pure Kotlin. There is nothing too crazy here, because all of models that are in a domain layer should be as clear, as simple, as clear as possible. Yeah, but let's compare this model with model from data layer. So as you can see, we also have a user model here with two properties, but we see the difference, right? We see that this model contains annotations. These annotations are needed to serialize data that comes from remote server to data classes that are used in our application. So as you can see, the context of using this model is totally different than in domain layer. The same as in presentation layer, because here we can have a requirement to, for example, display our user details in single line. So we don't need two properties here anymore, first name and the last name, but we want to have these two properties combined in single string. So yeah, in this three example, we have the same, almost the same, let's say, user model, but all of these models have different purposes of existence. And yeah, but what happened when we use only single model per for our data representation? We don't create a separate model for each architecture layer. We probably end up with the class like this. So as you can see, there is a data class of our user. But when we compare this class with previous examples, we see a lot of boilerplate here, right? For example, when we compare it to the domain layer, we see that we don't need these annotations, right? Because there is no usage for annotations inside domain layer, right? The same as with presentation layer. And what is more, in presentation layer, we probably don't need all of these properties like created ad and edited ad. There is also this is also a boilerplate in terms of presentation layer. So what are the consequences of lack of model mapping? I call it, one of the consequences is giant models. I call it giant models. So this is a model with a lot of boilerplate, unnecessary properties, unnecessary annotations. And this model is very unclear and unreadable. But in some cases, when we have a multi-module app, we can have like weird scenario when, for example, we keep all of these models inside single module, and we want to use one single particular model. We need to add entire module as a dependency to use only single model. So you probably feel that this is a very inefficient way to use models, right? So we should definitely avoid that. So my recommendation for these mistakes is to have at least one model for one architecture layer. But what does at least mean? It means that, for example, if we have a data layer and we have two different sources, two different sources, for example, the first one, the first source is remote server and the second one is local database, we should create separate models for each of these data sources. Why? do not mix the annotations of serialization tool and of database library. Yeah, so this is the first mistake, but even if we have model mapping in our application, we can still can have a wrong place for model mapping, which is the second mistake. And look at this slide. Does it look familiar to you? Personally, I saw this kind of class many times. So as you can see, it's a view model class with single use case. When use case is invoked, we get some data, and then we expose this data. We expose the data to the UI, and up to this point, everything is legit. Everything is good. But as you can see at the bottom of that class, you probably noticed that this is a mapping method, and this is not good approach of having such method inside class like view model or repositories. Why? Because we cannot reuse that code. So, for example, if we write a mapping method inside one view model, we cannot reuse it in a different view model, right? So we have a reusability issue. But what is even more crucial, when we have a mapping method inside view model, we break single responsibility principle. Because there is no place, there is no room for mapping in view model responsibilities. The main two responsibilities of view model are, first of all, expose the data to the UI, and the second one is to handle events that comes from the UI. And that's it. There is nothing more, right? So if we have mapping method inside view model, we break, as I mentioned before, we break single responsibility principle. And how we can fix that issue? So this is how I handle that. So here we simply move the mapping method from the body of view model to the body of our data class. So in this example, we want to map episode data class that probably comes from the domain layer to episode displayable object. And yeah, we can simply use the constructor here that takes episode class as a parameter and uses episode's properties to compose the episode displayable object. And that's it. And as you can see on the right side, the invocation of it is also very, very clear and very, very handy, because we simply call a constructor here. We know how to do it. It's very familiar to us. So I can definitely recommend you this approach when you want to create mapping method for your models. And yeah, personally, I think that first mistake is bad, the same as the second mistake, but the third one is even worse, because the third mistake is wrong place for business logic. And before we move any further, I have a question to you. And the question is, how to design display favorite episodes of a TV show. So let's imagine we have an application like Netflix, and we can see a lot of TV shows there. And when we tap on a particular TV show, we see all episodes of this TV show. And we have additional requirements, which is creating additional tab with favorite episodes of this particular TV show. And the question is how to approach that, how to design and how to solve this problem. Let's think about it for a moment. So, in the ideal world, we simply fetch all favorite episodes from a remote server, and we don't have to care about anything else. But unfortunately, reality is totally different, and we probably end up with scenario where server returns all of episodes, and we need to filter it out on the app side. And where plays the filtering logic? So the first thing that probably comes to our minds is view model, which is not a good example for this. Why? Because when we put our filtering operator, when we use our filter operator in a view model, we cannot reuse that filtering mechanism in a different view model. So we have a similar scenario that we had in mapping functions, right? And in this case, we also break a single responsibility principle because executing a business logic is not a responsibility of a view model. How about a repository then? So repository is slightly better than view model because in this example we can at least reuse that filtering mechanism. Yeah, we can use the same repository in different view models, but still this is not main responsibility of a repository. Repository should handle different sources of the data and should expose that data somehow to the UI, to the domain layer. And that's it. So what is the perfect place for executing business logic? So the one and only good question is business is, of course, domain layer, and to be more precise, use case. Use case is designed to execute, to hold, to handle business cases, business logic. And we should, when we have an operation like filtering, mapping, or sorting, we should always think that if it's our business logic or not, and if it is our business logic, we should always put this kind of operation inside our use case class. And what are benefits of this approach? So first of all, we can reuse our use case. So we can use the same use case in a different view models. We can easily share that use case logic across our application. But what is even more crucial here, that we can write unit tests for our business logic. And we have our logic fully tested, this almost immediately increase our code quality. We can do it because domain layer is independent of Android framework. We don't have any dependencies to Android framework inside domain layer, and that's why we can easily mock our classes there. Yeah, and as you probably know, when we have a good abstraction in our application, it's easier for us to write unit tests. But sometimes abstraction is unnecessary, which is our fourth mistake. And let's talk about that case, starting with a simple interface. So as you can see, we have a generic use case interface here with single invoke method. This method is a suspend function that takes data as a parameter and returns optional type. And there is nothing wrong with this interface. To be honest, this is good implementation of the interface. But the problem is how we use that abstraction, how we use this particular interface, because we probably use it this way. So when we have a view model, we don't call an abstraction, but instead we call a direct implementation of the use case. And we call a direct implementation of the use case, we don't have any advantage of using an abstraction, right? What is even more important, this approach do more harm than good, because first of all, we don't use an abstraction, any advantages of an abstraction, but we have also a limited number of parameters of our invoke function. It's only a single one, and we cannot change it because this interface is our use case contract, let's say. So when we have interface like this and we plan to use it this way, we should definitely avoid that, and we can just simply remove the interface, because we don't have any advantage of using abstraction here. But we can do better with abstraction, even if we don't use it directly. And the solution for that is an abstract class. Even if we don't use an abstraction when we have an abstract class, we still have some advantages, because as you can see in this implementation of the use case, we have an invoke method, and this invoke method is executed every time a use case is executed. And inside this method, we have a mechanism that simply launch our coroutine on a background thread and wrap the result with result class or interface. I don't remember, to be honest. But because of this, we don't have to implement the same mechanism over and over again in every use case. So even if we don't use our use case in a good manner, let's say, we don't use an abstraction, but we have an abstract class, we still have some advantage of using it, even if we using it wrong. Okay, and let's continue our conversation about logic, because last but not least mistake is navigation logic. It's inside the view. I know that this mistake is not fully related to clean architecture at all, But I saw many times that that logic is executed on the UI side, and I decided to put this mistake into this presentation. So if you have code like this, please simply don't do it this way. So we have a view and we set up a on-click listener on this view. It's nothing wrong with this approach, but the problem is when we execute our navigation logic inside on-click listener lambda. Why? Because in this approach, in this case, we cannot write unit tests, fast unit test for this navigation logic. We can only use slow integration. We can only use slow UI tests for this, and we probably don't do it at all. So yeah, first of all, we cannot fully test this navigation logic, but we should also follow the principle that says that our view classes like views, fragments, activities should be as dumb as possible. They should only display data, and that's all. And how to solve that? How to improve that piece of code? So a better solution for this is to simply take this navigation logic from view and put it to our view model class. So as you can see here, we have on episode click method, which is our event that comes from the UI. And inside that method, we simply decide, view model decides what to do in terms of that event. And in this case, when particular episode is clicked on our in our application, we want to display episode details. And what we do, we simply set a new navigation event, which is observed on the UI side. Because on UI side, we don't call our navigation logic directly in on-click listener lambda, but instead we have we send event that comes from the UI. In this case, on episode click, we send that event to our view model. View model handle that event, decides what to do, and choose particular navigation direction. And we can observe that we can use a live event for this, or channel, or whatever tool you like, and then simply navigates to the screen that we want to display. And in this approach, we can at least test our event. We can test our decision of view model when if it's correct. It means that we can check that if this particular event is invoked, we send a good navigation event. So yeah, this is the last slide of my presentation. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. I think I believe you enjoyed, and I don't know, Natalia, if we have a time for for any additional questions here.
Yes, thank you, Patryk. That was really interesting. And of course, we have time for some questions. So if you guys have any, please unmute and ask them, or simply, if you prefer, write your question. So if anyone would like to start, then...
Actually, I do have a question
Awesome.
about the last part, about sending the event. But with that approach, we still have the logic in fragment, basically, because after viewModel send an event to viewModel to fragment, fragment needs to decide what to do when it receives an event.
Yeah. We can still do better in this case, but I decided to don't put this on my slides. And basically, we can delegate that let's say decision to a class which is called a navigator or a router, and we can keep our logic that is related to navigation in such class. So it's better. It's definitely better than...
I'm not sure, but I think you've muted yourself.
Sorry? Yeah. Do you hear? You don't hear?
We've heard about the router, etc. So I think the most important part we get it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I must misclick something. Yeah. So you can definitely use a router or navigator here, but I would like to show that this approach is, still better than simply executes logic inside a view class, right? Because at least we can test that viewModel decisions, right? What viewModel, how viewModel manage that event, and how it produce an event for view to navigate to particular screen.
I have another one for you. First of all, thank you for such a great talk. So we kind of followed the similar principle what you mentioned about the use cases. Okay, but what happened is most of the time use cases become just a simple delegator to the repository, because every time you don't have business logic, right? If the API service are written properly as respect to the respecting the mobile needs. Okay, so in that case, like, we don't know what to do with it. If we remove the use case layer, then in some of the cases it kind of breaks the pattern, and if we keep it, it simply becomes a dummy class. So have you came across this problem, and if yes, then how do you approach this thing?
Yeah. This is quite common problem in Android applications, because maybe not only in Android application, but also in mobile application in general, because most of the logic is held on the server side, right? So I think we need to decide as a developers that if all of the logic is executed on the server side, maybe we don't need use cases for it. But I see many cases that the application starts very small, but becomes bigger and bigger, and we should be aware of it, because at the beginning of the designing and implementing things, we may think that, okay, it's like simple case and we don't need a domain layer. But when we work more on the application, we may end up with things like, for example, in my example on the slide, like I think that at some point we need execute some kind of business logic on the app side. And when we don't have a clean architecture, when we don't use cases, we are like in a very bad place because we don't know where to put this logic, right? Because view model is not a good place for executing executing business logic, the same as repository, right? So I would, in my opinion, personally, I would keep use cases, even if it's only a simple call of repository method, just to protect myself for the future, for maybe some bigger changes in the application.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you. It was a great question, to be honest. Yeah, the same as Jakub one.
Hi, Patryk. I just wanted to ask you, because let's say probably a lot of you are experienced developers, but I'm actually very new in the deal, let's say like that. So from what I've learned, I know that view model is a place where you put actually business logic, and now I'm very confused and I don't know what. I know that you put the live data for sure in it, and then you feed the UI from there, because for example you can use data binding or view binding, whatever you like, let's say. So what do you like? What would your advice be for me? How should I decide what to put in there? Like what should go in there? Let's say the reverse question, not to go there, but what should go in the view model for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think I mentioned about that in my presentation, but in general, view model has two main responsibilities, and the first responsibility is to expose the data to the UI, and this data should be prepared for the UI. I mean, like in my example with user, if we want to display first name and the last name in the single line, we should somehow prepare our data for this case. So there's one use case for vModel, and another one is to handle navigation. Sorry, not navigation, but events in general that comes from the UI. So there are two main responsibilities of a view model.
Third one would be to preserve data between orientation changes when the fragment is destroyed.
Yeah. It is also worth to mention, because I think that this is the purpose of creating and designing a view model, to preserve the data in terms of configuration changes. So yeah, that's a good point.
Patryk, one last one. I'm sorry about this, but I'm really curious, because you started with not create a single model class for everything, because it looks, let's say, messy, it's unreadable, etc. But how about performance then? Because these are multiple objects after all, it's not just one class.
I think we shouldn't, in this particular case, we shouldn't, care about that much about performance, because when we trying to focus on a performance, we are going crazy in some cases. For example, because we may end up with things like, okay, I should care about performance. So when I create a data class, it consumes more data than single class. So maybe I should use a single class for the data, you know, and we like overthinking about this. But in general, we use object-oriented programming in when we write Android application, and you know, there is a lot of objects inside our application, and once we don't use this object, is simply cleared by garbage collector. So yeah, and it is also a small object, right? It's only have some, you know, few properties there. So I don't think that there's you know, any issues with performance when we use multiple models for the same data representation.
Very much, Patryk.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Can
Awesome.
I add a small thing, Patryk, on your reply?
Yeah, sure.
So as Patryk mentioned, you shouldn't focus in such a minor detail, but if you'll try to see the pros and cons of having multiple models, okay, in a longer run, in terms of maintainability, you'll understand its value. Just consider the case that you're using JSON and then you decided to use Mushi. If you use the same model everywhere, you'll be screwed up. Changing annotations is not easy. So I'll definitely go with Patryk Serek. Look for these minor details, because anyways, the longer benefits are much more valuable than these very little tiny performance kickbacks.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you everyone. That was really interesting discussion, and thank you everyone for your really great questions. So if you have more, you can save them for the end of our meeting. If we have time, we can have some kind of a chit chat at the end, or you can simply also write them in the chat, and if Patryk or someone else will want to, then we can continue the discussion there. And now,
Natalia, can
yeah.
I add one thing?
Of course.
Because maybe someone may have a question after our meeting. So simply find me on the Twitter and ask me on a Twitter. I address all of your question, guys. So yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you,
Thank
Patryk,
you.
for adding that. So now let's go to Jakub and your Jakub presentation about testing with Hyperion.
Thanks. I'm really sorry that we are interrupting Patryk's presentation with mine, because actually I was super interested in his topic and I'd love to discuss it some more. So I can't wait till I end and we can discuss it some more. So I will share the screen now. Let me know whether you can see both the application and Android Studio, and if the font is big enough.
I can see it. Maybe if that's possible to make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, that should be great. I hope everyone else is also seeing it.
Okay, so basically I will show, I'm Jakub. I develop Android apps for some years now, and today I want to show you the tool that I've recently learned about. Yeah, programming is all about learning, so even after many years of programming, you can always find something new. And Hyperion library was something new for me. What's the Hyperion? It's app inspection tool that has a lot of useful plugins to make our lives, our testing much easier. It is a tool especially useful for QA engineers, for those QA engineers that are not able to use Android Studio, or they are not very proficient with technology. It's something that makes their job much easier and much faster. What's cool about that library is that it doesn't require any configuration. The only thing that you need to do is to add a few dependencies. It may seem like a lot, but you don't need all of those. You can see what's that and choose only those ones that you will in fact use. So the only one required is the first one, the core one. All the rest are optional. So I've created sample app to show how the library works by including those dependencies. We can shook our phone like I'm doing now, and cool menu is opened from the right side of the screen. In this menu, we can see all those plugins that we've included. And every plugin does something different. But I will show you the first one, the simplest one. So we've got main activity and few buttons here. The first one, crash button, the only thing it does, it basically crashes the app. So let's click it and see what's going to happen. As we may expect, it crashed our app. We can obviously see the stack trace in Logcat in Android Studio. So for us programmers, it may be not super useful. But for our testers, it's great because they can immediately see what was the cause of the exception, what's their Android version, what's their device model. They can click on share button and simply share to us all those information without doing anything, basically. So it's great for them to just have it in our app, especially when we don't need any setup for the plugin. What's also cool, we can add those to any project, see if we are using it or not, if it's useful or not, and then remove it if we don't like it. We don't waste any time on customizing it, so it's super quick to check and see if it's for you or not. But now we can see what other plugins we have. So a part of shaking the phone, you can also click on notification that is automatically added to the notification drawer. It's called Hyperion. After clicking, the same menu is opens, so you can use it also on emulators. And yeah, so let's see the first plugin, Attribute Inspector. This one, as the name suggests, it enables us to check what properties the view has. It's especially cool to check, for example, whether the color is the same as the one in our mockups, or we can even edit some of those values. For example, we can make the button larger. So let's do it. And as you can see, our button is now longer. We've changed its text. We can see how it looks after that change. I've got those requests from testers many times. Kuba, let's provide us some more data with different lengths of text to allow us to check whether everything looks good for longer views as well. With that, we can simply, they can simply add those texts for themselves. So let's see what else do we have. The next one is really simple but very useful. After clicking on the build config plugin, we can see all necessary information about our build, whether it's debug or not, whether what version code it is, what version name. Actually, the debug one, and when we have debug implementation, it's going to be always debug, because for release version, we won't see the library at all. So, but all those different information, especially about version, is really useful, because testers, especially those who are not technical, they not always know where to find those information. I've created such screens manually for many apps that I've built, just to enable them to check those information. So with that plugin, the only thing I needed to do was implement it, including the dependency, and it was already there. So let's check another one that I really like. Shared preferences. But maybe first I will show you how this main activity works, especially the Add Shared Preferences button. We've got Add Shared Preferences button that adds the, I will make it a bit bigger, takes current date and adds to the shared preferences, and then it updates the text on the top of the screen. So as you can see, every time I click, the value changes. But with Hyperion, we can also preview all our shared preferences. The only thing we need to do is click.
Jakub, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There is a request if you could make a font a little bigger.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. I can make it bigger even. I hope that's okay now. Yeah, you don't need to focus on a code much, because the presentation is mostly about the library, and the code will be included. I will post the link to the GitHub repository. So if you can't see something right now, you can always check it later, or contact me. I try to help. So going back to shared preferences plugin, as you can see, we can see all our shared preferences and see all values or keys and value of those preferences. So it's easy way to browse all preferences that we've added. We can also even change this value to see to check how the app is going to behave after we've changed the text. So as you can see, now the value changed, and application works as expected. Something really similar to it, to shared preferences, is something called File Explorer. It allows us to browse all files that we have in our app. We can also share it, or we can delete it. And the same, we can check how the app is going to behave after deleting it. I don't have much experience with that plugin. I'm not using it at all. So I'm not sure what its use cases are, but I believe there are many if you are creating and editing a lot of files. So let's go to the Geiger counter. This one informs us about lost frames during animation. If animation is not built properly, or your phone is not very technically advanced, or any other reason, you can see that your app behaves slower, that animation is not fluent, or it doesn't look like it's supposed to do. But it's not always easy to see. But with Geiger Counter, you can hear it. I'm not sure whether you will be able to hear it, but let's check. There was this characteristic peak. For me, something similar that they had in Chernobyl, for example, in this series. So I've created the animation button that make some animation, and let's hear. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether you've heard that, but every time I'm running the animation, there is information, sound information about that something is not correct, that our animation is not is behaving slower than expected. It's not surprising because our animation is simple. We are creating 1,000 small views and we are moving those views from top to the bottom. So that's obvious that's gonna slow our application. But thanks to the Geiger counter, I can hear that something worth checking. There is something wrong happening during the animation, so I need to look into the code and see what's wrong. I will turn it off now because for some longer time it's really annoying to hear that all the time. So I'm just turning it on sometimes. Oh, the next plugin is actually my favorite one. It's called Measurement Inspector. With simple click of the button, we can see how much space the button takes. We can also see how many dp are there between, for example, start of the view or end, or how many pixels are there between views. Yeah, I'm not sure about Jetpack Compose, to be honest. I didn't check it, but that's something worth checking, and I will do it after the presentation. But actually, it's so simple that anyone can do it yourself. Just include those dependencies and check with your app whether it works or not. But of course, I will do it myself also after the presentation. So let's go to the next plugin. It's called Phoenix. It does something really simple. It clears cache and data of our application and restarts the application. Obviously, we can do it ourselves. We can close the app, go to the settings, clear all those data, open the app, and we'll have the same result. But this way, it's much quicker. We don't need to browse those settings to find. We don't need to search for the icon of the application or anything like that. This way, 2 clicks and our app is cleared. We can see that it's cleared because there is no text on the top and the text is taken from the preferences. So we can also use the shared preferences plugin to check whether they are really cleared. They are. We don't see anything here. Okay. We've got some more plugins, the last 2. Recorder. I think that all QA engineers have their own way to record things and share those recordings. But with that plugin, it's super simple. We just need to click one button, start the recording, do some things, turn off the recording, and click on videos. We've got our recording saved. We can really easily share the video to the developer, and they will be able to check what went wrong with the application. Unfortunately, there is no way to preview the video from here, but we can find it in files and preview from there, or share it to some other place. The last one is called Timber. I'm not sure whether you know Timber or not, but that's a library that logs information. So, for example, whenever I click the Art Shared Preferences button, we are logging information that this button was clicked. So I'm clicking the Shared Preferences, and we can see in a logcat that it was in fact logged. But testers not always are able to see that, and sometimes it is useful. This way they can click on this plugin called Timber and see all the logs that application made. We can also filter them, we can share them. It's sometimes useful for developers to see. Yeah, exactly, Crimson Sun. I agree with you completely. That Timber is much easier to use, and it has a lot of cool feature that normal logger doesn't have. But I will not go into that anymore. So that was the last plugin that was created by owners of the Hyperion. But what's cool about this tool is that we can add our own plugins, and other people can create their own plugins. So we can browse the internet and search for different ones, or create your own. It's super simple, but I will show you quickly how to do it, because there is no much documentation about it. The documentation about it is difficult to find, so I will show you how to do it. The one thing that you need is some plugin class that extends the plugin and overrides one method, create plugin module. That's the one thing. We need also this annotation, because this way Hyperion will be able to locate your plugin and automatically add it to your list, to list of plugins. So we need that annotation and plugin class. And the third thing we need is sample plugin module. This class creates the view visible on a list of plugins. So now I will open the Hyperion again. And as you can see here, there is a plugin called Our Own Custom Plugin. That plugin that I've created, you can see the view here. It's simple text view with some text. Yeah. So the only thing that we actually need to do is to inflate that view and return it from this method. Thanks to that, Hyperion will be able to automatically find this plugin and attach it to the list. So it's going to be visible. But it's useful to add some action after clicking this. So that's why I've attached the click listener on the view. And after, you can see that after clicking this plugin, we can see first toast that informs us that the plugin started, and another toast every 3 seconds that informs us that the plugin started. So I won't go into details on how it was created, because it's nothing related to the Hyperion. But you can basically add any logic you want in onClick method. You can even create your own activities. For example, like the one that shared preferences has. So after clicking shared preferences, it's create a different activity with some data. So possibilities are limitless. So yeah, that was all about plugins. The only thing that I forgot to mention is to have this annotation processor called autoservice. That is something that I wasn't able to find information about anywhere, but without that, Hyperion was not able to find our plugin. So that's tip from me, that we should always add it if we don't already have it in our application. I guess that's all I wanted to share. If you've got any questions about Hyperion or anything else, it's good time to ask it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jakub. It's very interesting. I think a lot of us is feeling very inspired now to join this plugin to our projects. And if you guys have any questions to Jakub, then please feel free to ask them.
Hi, Jakub. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, thanks for the presentation, first of all. And my question is, do you know if the layout inspectors or the measurement inspector tool works with Jetpack Compose?
Are you asking about Hyperion or the tool from the Android Studio itself?
Oh, Hyperion.
No, I unfortunately I didn't check it with Compose. Yeah, that's something worth to check whether it works or not. If there is no more question, I'm uploading the links. Oh, it doesn't look as I expected it would. So I will try to, yeah, but those all links that I've included are links to the library, links to the app that I've showed you, and link to my LinkedIn if you want to ask some more questions, or you can ask it also on Slack.
Awesome. Thank you, Jakub, very much. And now we can, last but not least, presentation for today. So stage is yours, Mohit, and let's hear about data in an offline world.
Thank you. Let me start these slides. Just give me a moment, please. I think so you should be able to see the slides, but the slides are on the wrong notes. So I'll just probably move it to the first one. Yep. Are you able to see my slides now?
We can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. So, hello guys. Thank you for joining in, and thank you for giving me opportunity to share my thoughts today. I'm gonna talk about how to sync your data in an offline world. I'm kind of adding few non-related things, but it will make more sense when I proceed with slides. So this is the agenda for today's talk. It's a short one. I'll be going around the problem statement. Then we'll be introducing the Realm ecosystem and how it is trying to solve the problem statement. If time permits, I'd like to go into a small code demonstration to help you get started with Realm, followed by a small Q&A session. The main aim for this session is to help you understand how to build offline first application and enable you with the basic skills on how to get started quickly. So the learning curve becomes a bit less steeper for you guys. Before I jump into the actual presentation, let me introduce myself. Who am I? I'm Mohit. I go with the Twitter handle Code with Mohit. I'm currently working with MongoDB as a Realm developer advocate. I've been programming for more than 12 years, and that too in mobile domain. I've been fortunate enough to start my career with Android 1.5, and since then I've been rolling with it. You can scan this QR code. It will point it will point you to my Twitter profile, and I'll be happy to take your questions there here, and I'll be posting my slides over there post the presentation. So before wasting any more time, let me get started. So what are we solving for? First, let's try to understand the problem statement. So this is the problem statement which I'm trying to talk about. A very simple one. An application request for a data. It receives the data, and then the data is shown on the UI, right? It's a very complex problem, correct? But don't underestimate this. I'll let you know what is the other half of it. As you keep on building this problem, you will understand there is far more things or area to cover up. Like, say, for example, you want to make a request for getting some data, right? But before that, you'll have to check whether your app is online or not. Then, once your app is online, then you decide, okay, let me send a request. Then you might have to change it, see if everything is good or not. Once that is there, then you receive a response. Then you will have to process the response and see whether the data is correct or not. If everything goes well, then you get a happy user. If anything messes out, you'll have to, end up in a very complex retry mechanism or an error screen, right? Which is not an idealistic thing we want to show to our user. And God forbids if we missed one of the use cases or one of the edge cases, sorry, it might end up into a crash. And since all of us are programmers, we don't like crashes at all, especially when you're building a good feature and you want to give best user experience. Now let's try to see how this correlates into a technical architecture. So this is how it's gonna look like when you're gonna build it. There will be a mobile app which will have its own database. You'll have some interaction with it. Based on that, you might decide, okay, let me make an API call. Then the API call might go into a messaging queue, which is installed by a backend server, and then it will be processed by it, and then based on some logics and algorithms and everything, that data will be processed and sent back to you, right? And then again, you go into the same channel, you decide, okay, I got my data, what should I do with it, whether I should save it or not. This make things far more complicated because there are so many moving parts here. You have your mobile phone here, you have your web, you have your backend service there, you have your database as well, and then internet for sure, right? So what are the some very obvious challenges with it? Network latency, as I mentioned you, it keeps on varying, so you never know how much reliable it is. Then connectivity is also unreliable. We are not sure whether you're connected or not, right? Apps have its own life cycle, right? Shutdown and restart is just one point of them. You can get a call or anything like that, right? Most important is this: as you keep on developing good mobile applications, you'll have to also make sure that the user experience is good. User experience doesn't only mean that the UI is very good and jazzy. You have to also make sure that you're treating his or her phone very well, because if you don't respect that, Android will give you a warning that this app is consuming a lot of data or battery, and that might lead you to an uninstall application, right? So there are a lot of things which you'll have to think. And what are the scopes for any, limited good application? What do you think? In my opinion, what I'll say, an application should work irrespective of whether it's connected with the internet or not. It should be very much reactive in by nature. Like whenever changes happen, it should show immediate changes on the UI and let the user know that something is happening or something has already happened. Plus, it should be real time and collaborative as much as possible. I do understand when the internet is not there, it'll not be real time, but when the situations prevail, you should be real time and collaborative as much as possible. So, the latency between any changes should be as minimalistic as possible. And last but not the least, seamlessness. Data and the experience should be consistent when the user moves around from one devices to another. So, in my opinion, these are some of the things which I say, okay, it qualifies for a good application. So, this is the architecture which we saw earlier. Okay, wouldn't be it be great if we can get rid of all this, right, and make it something like this, right? If this architecture is there, I think so none of the solution architect or the technical architects will have a problem, because literally you got rid of all the moving part. But mobile apps cannot directly talk to the database, right? So, and there are definitely, even if there is a solution for doing that, it's not the best way of doing it, right? Because you need to write your logic somewhere. So how do we do it? This is where Realm comes into picture. Realm get rid of all the moving parts and try to simplify the application workflow with respect to data and the architecture both. If I redraw the diagram, it will be a linear diagram, something like this. There is a mobile, which is connected with a sync, which is internally connected with a database. So how many moving parts I have now? How many total parts I have now? It will be one, the mobile phone, which will have its own local database. Second, a sophisticated sync mechanism that can help you replicate your changes between devices and the backend server. And third, the last one is a cloud database called Atlas. So, at the end of the day, what is Realm? Realm is an open source mobile database which is object oriented by nature. It is built with the aim of supporting offline first application. So all the logics or boilerplate code which will have to make sure what happens if this is there, this is not there, and all those stuff is already gone. That's not it. Like with this kind of database, you don't need an ORM, right? Because it's already an object oriented database, so you don't need an ORM for that. If you are very much concerned about the data security, it provides you mechanisms to encrypt your data with a single API call. So these all are there. And last but most important, in my opinion, it provides you the functionality to have GDPR compliance. So you don't have to worry whether your data is going out of one region, which is kind of kind of a concern with other competitors. So what additionally does this platform offers? Because this is all good, but if you're trying to build move to a new ecosystem, you should understand what additional offerings it has. It has functions, so it allows you to write cloud functions which can get updated or get executed as per your sorry. It has some cloud functions which you can use to process some data on a cloud level and insert it into your DB. It has triggers which gets executed whenever some kind of event happens, right? You can say my inventory is running low, I want to send a trigger or do something like that, right? So these are all things execute that. As I mentioned, your security is very one of the very important aspect of any applications. It provides you its own mechanism to do the security thing. Plus, it also provides you some standard authentication mechanisms like email, password, anonymous users, OAuth2, or integrate with your own GW2 implementations or O2 implementations. You don't have to worry for that. That's pretty much one of the another aspect when it comes to data is whether you have the control over the data or not. That means whether you can provide the policies which user reads or writes what data. So yes, realms definitely help you with that as well. But when you're talking about data as well, there is another thing, right? What happens if two same persons are trying to update the same data, right? The conflict resolution mechanisms. Realm has a very straightforward mechanism over that. It has these three basic rules: delete always wins, last update always wins, inserted in a list are ordered by time. So these are very simple rules by which Realm decides whether how it should resolve any conflicts. And as per my experience using applications and building with it, I've realized these rules are more than sufficient for any of the use cases. But let's say, for example, in one of the use cases, you decided no, these rules are messing my data. You have the privilege or custom option to customize these rules as per your need. Realm is available on all the major platforms: iOS, Android, React Native, C Sharp, Unity, Flutter, Web SDK, etc. One of the things which I haven't mentioned here, Realm also has a KMM SDK coming up. Currently, it's in the alpha version. Okay, soon gonna be beta. So it's going to get updated. So you don't even have to worry what happens in future. So now let me try to iterate on the workflow, what happens and how it happens. So let's say, for example, someone on the mobile phone decided to make some changes. As soon as the changes happens, uh, that change is written to the mobile SDK. Now, Realm is intelligent enough to understand what are the changes, what kind of changes has to be updated to the backend, right? So it internally collects all that information and send it to the Atlas. Realm Sync is an intelligent layer which does this all this communication for you. It is so intelligent that it also makes sure that the battery life can be saved as much as possible. So it's very much efficient to understand what changes and how it has to be. Likewise, similar thing happen when something gets pushed on the database directly, or some other user has pushed some information, it has to propose it on the UI. As soon as the things or the information has been pushed on the Atlas side, the same changes get triggered to the realm sync, and it understands, okay, this information has to be propagated back to the user, and it happens likewise. Realm sync has one another very important aspect that's called partitioning of the data. So basically, partitioning of the data, what I'd like to say is that, let's say, for example, you have hundreds of users, right? And they have tons of data. Now, being a mobile SDK, you won't like to save the data on your mobile phone. Primarily two concerns. One, the database is too huge. Another, there is a security concern. Why should I have the data of X and Y person when it's not my concern, right? So that's another thing. Now, this is where partitioning comes into picture. It is a mechanism that helps you ensure that the right set of data is shared with the right person. So you can do that. So now let me jump to the coding. I'm switching my screen, so just give me bear with me for a second. So now you should see my Android Studio shortly. Okay, now I gave you some of the basic theoretical information on how things are there on Realm, but let me also help you get started with Realm. Getting started with Realm is really simple. You don't need much things. First, you need to add just the Android plugin. So as you can see here, I've added the plugin here. Based on the plugin, you have to also add a dependency. So a dependency has been added. Once the dependency is added, that's all is required. Okay, and one more additional thing is that I have mentioned my realm app ID, which you can define in a constant class as well, but I prefer to keep it in my build script. Now, since this is there, let me re-initialize my realm. There's no realm initialization step. It's not required at all. What you have to do is simply just create the instance of rel whenever it's required. So as you can see in my application class, this is my application class, I have just written the lazy instance of realm sync. Why I have created like this is just because my project have dependencies over realm sync in all of the view models, and I want to keep them as segregated as it was mentioned by Patryk in the first call, right? Keep things as segregated and as abstract as possible. Okay, so let me show you my fragment as well. So see, now I have just hard coded here just for the sake of demo, not to expand the scope, but you can push this with any of the dependency injection framework. So now how do I make use of it, right? So this is on my right side, you will be able to see an application which does nothing. It just tracks how many times a user has opened the application. That's it. It's just does this very simple thing. Okay, so okay, now how does I do it? It's very simple. In my init, I have just written update my data. So everything is by default, since it's a KMM and a Kotlin SDK, it supports coroutines and everything. So things becomes very much natural if you're a experienced Kotlin developer. So it's very simple. As I mentioned you, it makes sure that you have to be authenticated. So you decide, okay, I decided to be an anonymous user for now. And then I define my partition key. For now here, my partition key is the user ID. And then I request in, okay, give me the set of data which is available. So getting set of data is very simple, something like this. And that's it. Once the data is there, I just copy that information, okay, and update the count, because this has been called in the init. So I'm assuming this is called first time, and I just simply update the user count, right? Let's say for instance, this is not a returning user, it's a fresh user. In that case, I simply create the view model. I simply create a model, update the partition key, and increase the count by 1. That's it, right? That is all is required to, push the data into your database. That's it. Nothing more or less apart from this. Now, if for a reason you want to keep on, listening to this value, right? There might be someone who might be pushing this value from the backend. How do you do it? So flow by nature. Okay, so similar code, but I have just abstracted in a different method so that it becomes simpler for the presentation. So you can see here, I did nothing. I just get the same instance of the user, and creates a config, and then ask realm, hey, I with this config, with this partition key, I want to get access certain set of data. And then I simply say, okay, get me that information, but this time I want that information to be as a flow. That's it. And I just process that information here, and it's shown on the UI. Likewise, it goes hand to hand if you're trying to delete the information or update the information. So here, this is a delete view model. Okay, I'm just resetting my view model to 0. So nothing much fancy, same code in different method. So as you can see how simple it is with Realm to get started and how to work with it. One of the benefits which I have noticed working with Realm is that a lot of boilerplate codes get removed on how to manage data. Like here, if you'll see, there is no code which will explain you, okay, whether my app is online or not, whether right set of data has to be passed or not. Everything is being managed by a Realm at the end of the day. So that's pretty much on my side. Let me go back to the presentation now. Okay. Okay, so my presentation is there. Okay, that's all. Thank you, folks, for listening to me. I hope I was able to explain you something new and you enjoyed talking to me. I'll be happy to take on your questions.
Thank you, Mohit, so much, and thank you for joining us today with your presentation. That was really interesting. So if anyone has question, then of course feel free to ask here or by writing, or also later via Twitter if you feel like it.
I have a question to you, Mohit, because you showed us code from the app perspective, but I'm interested how many you need to do, on the backend side. We just simply need to use a MongoDB database, or is something additional required to, keep it that data sync between database on the backend side and with our local database.
Okay. Thank you for asking that. I think so. I didn't make. I should have added it to my slides. Okay. So first thing, you asked me whether it works with MongoDB, only with MongoDB or not. Yes, Realm is a product of MongoDB and it works only with MongoDB. So you need to have a MongoDB Atlas account with that. MongoDB Atlas account is a free tool. You don't need to pay up for that for a certain threshold, and I think so, as per my experience, that threshold is good enough for any MVP to validate its product, so you can move forward with it. Also, you asked me how you are interested to understand how much code is required to build apps, write logics on the server side. Um, let While I'm talking to you, I'm also trying to open my backend console so that I can show you in hand to hand. But it's almost the same as much as you're required to do it on the front end. So nothing much is required on the backend side as well. It's just few configuration level changes. Few configurations needs to be set up once you're creating your application, and apart from that everything is seamless. You don't need to do much things. Things get a little complicated when you're trying to add some complex logics in functions or triggers, but no, that is on a worst case, and normally functions and triggers are also not that complex. um if Let me also share you something else. So this is I have opened my personal account. So this is my Atlas database, and this is client. Okay, so this client doesn't have anything in it. It is pure dummy client. So nothing here, no rules, no schema. Everything is empty. So I just showed you just to help you understand that it is very simple to get started with Relp, and it will help you solve more any kind of complex use cases. I forgot to mention about the support for GraphQL, but if you're a pro user and you are love with GraphQL, you can use that here as well. I hope this answers your query.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing it.
Okay, anyone else would like to ask a question now?
Maybe not a question, but I have a comment that I've never used Realm, but I think I should at least try it and see whether it's something for me. This presentation inspired me to do it.
Thank you. I'll be more than happy if you have any query to help you out and solve any of the complex use cases as well.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so I still wait for your question, but in the meantime, I will use this time to thank you all one more time for joining, and most of all for presenting this really great speeches. It was really pleasure to meet you all today, today's evening, or maybe morning, because I know we have people from all over the world, which is great. I see some question on the Q&A. Rucha asks, our tech stack includes KMM at the moment. Shall we wait for KMM SDK or start with Android side? What do you think? I guess this is for you, Mohit.
Our tech stack actually, I couldn't understand Rucha, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
There is this question in chat if you want to read this, Mohit.
Okay. So in my opinion, so now what I understood from the question is that you already have KMM in your product and you're trying to ask me whether you can get started with it or not. In my opinion, I'll definitely recommend you. I can't unmute my, okay. If if I understood your question, can you please say type yes? Okay, perfect. So, in my opinion, I will recommend you start exploring and implementing a KMM on the Android side, because the way I see with my experience, it's the future. People might have some cross opinions that the SDK is still in alpha version. It is not production ready as alpha is, but even with the alpha version, Realm has actually migrated its SDK to KMM, and we see a very big stability with the alpha version itself. So I'll definitely recommend you start working with KMM.
Thank you for this question and this answer. So, do we have any more questions for today? Okay, Rucha also asks if do you have any tips regarding where to start?
I am googling it out. So I just gave a talk on KMM uh, on Saturday. Um, I think so. The slides are there on my Twitter handle. Okay, I'll try to post it here as well, but you can connect me there. Let me just find in the meanwhile. And till the time uh, people can ask next question.
Don't think we have any for now.
That I think so. It's a good time to chit chat within ourselves then.
Yeah. Well, I'm also wondering if anyone would like to share what are other interesting topics you would like to hear about in the future, because as you may know or you may not know, we are doing those kind of meetings on a regular basis. It's usually about every 2 months. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but in general, we try to meet every now and then. So if you have any topic you would like to hear about, or maybe you would like to be a speaker on our next meeting, please let me know. You can write to me on Slack or tell me here. That would be really, really helpful to know what you would like to listen about.
Hello.
Hello, we can finally hear you.
I just rejoined, so that's why I can unmute myself now.
That's great.
Yes, Mohit. So my question is like right now, I'm working with ClearScore, and we have a product called TriScore, and right now, we our tech stack is in KMM. It's in production, and we were discussing about the spiking relam today. So it's fortunate that today I joined this and talk to you about it. So we would like to start with Realm, but we are not sure that we should go for this KMM SDK. We should wait for it, or we can start with like native individual platform. So I heard you that you are saying that I should go for it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. So I was saying in general with respect to Realm. Um, so just a small disclaimer: I work for MongoDB, and MongoDB is a public listed company. So I cannot directly let you some internal information available. But what you mentioned is that um, you are in a phase of exploring a database that can help you with your mobile application, which is based on KMM. Our SDK is moving at a very fast rate, so I'll definitely recommend you trying to give it a shot, because if you start implementing different database, like say for example core data or SQLite on iOS and Android, you are going against the main principle of KMM. That's, I think so, that was primarily one of the reasons why you guys opted for KMM. Okay. So you can definitely give it a shot and try seek yourself whether it fits your use cases or not.
Right. Do you have like any tips that where to start, what to do, and um, I know you mentioned one document, Realm website for insights, but
So
can give me some more tips.
okay, so to get started with Realm, I'll share you one more. Uh, I'll share you one more link very shortly. I'm just looking at while I'm talking to you. That will help you get started with Realm. But sadly, that is with Realm Java, the old SDK. We are currently preparing the Realm Kotlin SDK documentation that can help you get started. Okay. This is our official link for getting started with Realm on Kotlin. So kindly you can follow that, and you can keep following me. I'm about to write something on the Kotlin SDK as well, so that would help you to get started very easily.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Patrick, you asked me something learning KMM in general. Did, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Because I wasn't sure if you ask about some sources about learning KMM in terms of caching the data with Realm, for example, or you looking for sources to learn KMM in general,
Okay, no. Actually, our app is right now in production and we are using KMM already. We already adapted a lot of stuff in that. And yeah, thank you so much for today's talk, that clean architecture. We're following a few of them and I'm looking for the solution for the fourth one. We are not adapting that. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your talk today.
Thank you too.
Yeah, Natalia, I'm finished. I don't have more question now.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for joining again. I know that you are one of our regular ones.
Because you have very good talks.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear that. Anyone would like to ask about something more or have some thoughts about today's meeting? If no, we will be slowly wrapping up to have some of the evening free for ourselves. Okay, I will show you myself for the goodbye. So thank you one more time to our great speakers and to our great public. And I will hope you to see you again on the next GDG3City meeting. I hope this meeting was interesting for you. So have a nice evening and see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you.